Hello, Amber. And how are we doing today?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm a little hoarse, as you can hear from my voice. I've been teaching for the last 6 days in a row now, and
That's a lot.
it's had a bit of an effect on the body.
It takes its toll, doesn't it?
It does, but we're here, and I'm happy to be with you today.
So, are you going to surprise me again with a topic that I'm unprepared for?
I like to think that you are very flexible in how you can take your topics,
Perhaps agile is the right word.
and agile is the exact topic of today's conversation.
Oh, well, there
How
you
we are
go.
being agile in our projects.
Well, how's that for kismet?
Yeah.
So, what do you want to talk about specific to agile? Because, in full disclosure, I am a project management professional. I have my PMP with PMI. I also have an agile hybrid project professional certification, but I am not an agile project manager specifically. It's not what I have trained in. And I think I approach agile project management more as a verb as opposed to a noun.
Mhm.
So the idea is what is the agile approach to project leadership as opposed to I specifically always come from an agile standpoint. I was trained in sort of predictive waterfall style project management and of course recognize that there's rigidity to it that doesn't necessarily, I don't know, work in complexity and change a lot of the times right now, particularly in 2025. So that's my kind of full disclosure. I'm a hybrid
Right.
person. What about you? What's your experience?
Yeah. So the best way to put it is, uh, as a verb, am I someone who's agile? I'm military. So, of course, improvise, overcome, adapt. That's
Interesting.
built right into our DNA.
Okay.
But in terms of agile and its use in project management, I'm a novice.
Okay.
And so, uh, for our listeners out there who may not know what agile is or how it works, how can we get them to understand it as a modality? What are the benefits? Why should I be considering it?
Okay. So, agile project management, the noun, is an iterative method of project development that is hyper focused on each section or iteration of the project planning that gets to be reviewed and critiqued by the team. The overall goal of this method is to shorten the project phases in the development process and increase the overall level of improvement to the planning, but also to the project delivery itself. So that's the product, the service, or the result. It has its origins in the software industry. And that makes sense because for those of you that maybe aren't in the software industry, a good example of, software coding work to someone who admittedly is not a coder is my mother is a knitter and she loves to knit. And there's one thing I have learned about knitting in my limited experience in doing it myself is that when you're knitting, if you happen to drop a stitch and you don't notice it, if you continue to knit that item, that sweater, that whatever it is, you can't fix that drop stitch unless you unravel all of the stitching that's come after it. And that becomes the only way to fix that one dropped stitch. So, I mean, either that or applique something on top of it when you've finished. But with that, in coding, it's the same thing. And this is, like I said, this is not my industry, but my understanding is you don't code for 3 months straight without testing whether it's worked or working. Mostly because if you have any mistakes that you haven't tested, in order to fix them at the end of that 3 month or 90 days, you have to actually take out or unravel all of the code that has come after the mistake to fix it. That, from that knitting analogy, helps me as a non kind of software person understand that, like, if we make a big plan and then we just work the plan and we don't check our work, we're going to create more work for ourselves. And so that idea of the software industry initiates this because it doesn't make sense to the type of work they're doing to go really long down the process before you test to see if it's accurate. And because of that industry and its success with it, it ends up becoming this really effective or popular tool to bring into almost any project environment because we, instead of just blindly delivering on the plan, we question, is this plan working like we had planned? And if it is, great. But if it isn't, we make changes and adjustments. And that's the iterative nature of that. And what I see as an agile hybrid professional is I can use this approach in pockets of my project planning and in my sort of monitoring and controlling the work, because it means that I'm checking for defects, I'm doing quality control, I'm doing risk assessment, and I'm doing all of that while I'm continuing to plan for the next phase or the next steps, which means it's an informed project planning process, as opposed to we're going to assume we know what we're doing and it's all going to work well. And in a world 2025 with change, complexity, conflict, and all the uncertainty, it's a far more sophisticated and appropriate way to manage resources, because we don't have to overspend or overspend our resources in money, but also overspend our resources in schedule and time without knowing if it's been worth it or not. It reminds me of the famous poet Maya Angelou's quote, "When you know better, you can do better." And that's an agile quote because it is literally saying when you learn something and it gives you knowledge of how better or how wiser to do something, you can immediately take that wisdom and inform your future behavior. So that becomes this agile cycle. And for me, that is why it's so important for me to be a hybrid project manager, because it's not about one way is the right way. It's about who knows what the ways are going to be. So we just keep learning as we go. And we do that in progressive, team based work with analysis. And, we have to be willing to accept that we've maybe made decisions that weren't fully informed. But when we have the information, we make new choices, new decisions.
So I loved how you brought that up there, and that space between the noun and the verb as to which one is which.
Mm-hmm.
But I also like that little piece you had on hybrid.
Mm.
So let's start with, if agile is part of the hybrid, what's the other part of the hybrid, so that people can understand the different methods you're using for thinking?
So, kind of classic project management is called, what we title it is predictive or waterfall. And the reason we use the term waterfall is because it literally gives you this image. So when you think about a waterfall, what is it doing? It's usually from a height. The water is flowing downward, often cascading from level to level to level. But it is always starting from a height and it is always working its way down, mostly because gravity and water, it just naturally does that. So a waterfall cascades downwards. And usually also, at least the most attractive waterfalls that are so famous, the ones that are beautiful that we go, ooh, aha, they cascade because they hit certain levels. And as the water pools at that next level, then it fills up and it pours over. And so you get this idea of like a cascading waterfall approach. So traditional project management was based on, we have an idea to make something, a product, service, or result. It's unique because we don't have it already. We want to innovate and create something. How are we going to do it? Well, we're going to take a bunch of factors that we have in front of us and we're going to start making plans. We make those plans in a waterfall style approach, in that we, have it cascade in an order. And it's ordered because in the beginning we know very little. And so we make plans to make certain what is uncertain. We pull all the tools and the resources, the schedule, we define scope, what's going to be in this unique product, service, result, what's going to be out of this unique product, service, or result. And with all those details, we create a very robust plan that cascades from the beginning when we don't have it right to the end where we want it, and it's going to be realized. What we don't in traditional project management talk a whole lot about, or didn't talk a whole lot about, was how we do that, but continuously thinking of how is it working? Have we assessed and calculated risk? Are we measuring for quality? So there's this idea that even though we'd have phases, so those might be these the cascade points where, the water falls to this pooling level. And then as that sort of builds, then it spills over. It's We don't always classically analyze that, at least in a traditional project management sense. And a lot of planning is done up front in that predictive. And, just by using the term predictive to describe it, you recognize there's a bit of arrogance to it because, well, this is what we're predicting will happen. Well, what's the prediction based on? Well, it's based on us making it up. And making it up means there's uncertainty. How are we going to manage the uncertainty? Well, we would use traditionally like we would perform a change control request, and we would have these formal, well, we planned it this way, but then this happened. And so here's our change control request. And we take it to a board of people. We get them to approve or deny. We get more money, more resources. We get more time, more resources. And then we take that change that's approved and we push it through the initial plans that are kind of from point A to point Z, all the plans. Well, we struggle as project professionals, particularly in this day and age, to, not over plan when there's so much unpredictable stuff that's coming. So the hybrid is from that very traditional waterfall model, which has huge merit. And there's a lot of really successful projects that still work very much on that. The challenge is when change comes, even a very traditional project environment needs to address that change and complexity in a much quicker fashion than having, well, we then get a formal board together and we make different plans. And all of that just takes way too much time. So the hybrid agile approach is having this mindset that we're going to plan and we're going to have great plans, but we're also going to hold them a little looser. And instead of getting to the end of the plan before we ask ourselves if it was effective, we're actually going to be literally deciding at regular intervals to assess how it's going. And because of that, it means we're not going to do as much planning ahead. We're not going to plan for 90 days before we start working the project. We're actually going to plan a little bit, maybe even a week or two of planning, and then we're going to start acting on some of those plans. And as we act on the plans, we're going to evaluate them, we're going to analyze them, and then we're going to go, oh, this needs to be adjusted, which means we haven't written the plan for the next 2 weeks yet, which helps us then when we write that plan, it's informed. It's an informed plan. Informed by what? By our lessons learned, which, in a project environment, lessons learned was always something we did at the end of a phase or at the end of a project. In an agile environment, we're essentially saying lessons learned is a daily occurrence. We are always iterating. We are always learning and gathering lessons. So it's not different. It's the timing in between that makes it different. An agile approach is essentially we are not going to be arrogant to decide that exactly what we've planned is going to be exactly how it goes because the world is too complex. And so being agile and having that mindset means, okay, we are going to expect complications. We are going to expect to have to adjust and change. And as a result, we are not going to waste time up front deciding it's going to work a certain way when we couldn't possibly know. So instead, we plan a little, we work a little, we assess, and then we plan more. And we do that in cycles and we iterate and spin. And so that's why they both work together as complements, I think, not as one or the other. Maybe that's a bit of a radical attitude. It is my attitude and opinion. Not everyone in this space agrees with me, but I would argue that this is just from my point of view, what I see the great power of the agile mindset is. And I think for me personally, my personal professional philosophy is really that when I know better, I can do better. So because of that, I really want to think about how, as a project manager, as I learn, I don't want to just use that learning, a year from now. I want to start using it immediately. So,
Yeah, I love that because you're taking what you've learned and you're putting it into application right up front.
right.
But one of the things, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, you used two words, and I love these two words. You brought up certainty and uncertainty. And Lord knows I love both of those words because there are things we're certain of, and they play out the same way, and there are things we're uncertain of.
Mhm.
But there's also, and I like, because you came back to iteration, right? Because um, you can have the best iteration of an MP3 player until the iPhone shows up,
Mhm.
and now the iteration has to look different.
Well, and, what happens when we're not even using phones anymore? What happens when that adaptive technology, moves into the space where, like, the cell phone you and I carry today is not long for this world? That doesn't mean we won't have a device similar that does the same work. It's just is not gonna feel and look like it does, because the cell phone I hold in my hand today doesn't look and feel like the first one I ever had either. It's iterating, right?
Yeah. So what do we do? Because now we're talking about adapters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And adapters on a team. So I want to take this from just the individual into the
Okay.
team environment.
Mhm.
Some of our team is going to be really good at adapting. Some of our team is going to be, well, let's call them late adapters or adopters.
Yes.
Late adoption,
Okay.
early adoption versus late adoption. What are some of the ways you found to be useful in helping people understand agile thinking and the adoption of agile thinking?
I'm pausing not for effect, but for thought.
Sure.
So my silence is because I want to be really cautious here. Um, I I believe the hesitancy that a lot of professionals feel around adopting an agile approach to managing their work is that it's new and different and it's not what they're used to. And that represents change, and change is always felt as a loss experience. Humans feel and accept change as a loss first. What are we losing? We're losing the way we knew. And that comes with grief and discomfort. And early adopters tend to be people who are eager to make change because they become restless, because they're innovators, because they have creativity on their side. Sometimes I would argue in this day and age, we're learning these individuals often may have more neurodiversity. We didn't understand that, but we do now. We have this way of understanding that what a normal person is irrelevant. Normal subjectively may not actually exist anymore. The diversity of the way humans think and approach work is really far more at play. And early adopters often tend to just they have energy to change. People who don't have that energy to change often they literally get stuck in that, oh, but I know myself and I know my work this way. I don't know myself and I don't know my work this new way, and I don't like it. And some people just feel I don't like it as a barrier, and it's really hard to get past that. I think the challenge also is that a lot of us in professional environments have been reared to expect that the metrics don't change. The measurement of your success is always going to look like this. And in project world, in the project economy, the measurement of success, we used to always talk about the triple constraints: time, scope, and cost. And those are the rubrics we use. That's it. Well, if I led a project today and only evaluated it and managed it based on time, scope, and cost, I would fail, because those are not broad enough categories. Because what we realize actually, and this is where Agile project management does a great job, fundamentally within the 12 principles of Agile, Agile says, no, we bring the customer, the client, the interest holder in right from the beginning. We engage with them on a consistent basis. We get feedback. How do they feel about what we are developing on their behalf? We involve them. Why? So that we don't get off track. That means certainty and uncertainty can change immediately, because an interest holder that, for instance, is financing a project that all of a sudden is uncomfortable with the decision that's made, if they're close enough to that decision, they can say, I'm uncomfortable with that decision. And the project team has a choice. What do we do with that? Do we ignore them, or do we take that feedback and then integrate that? And you realize, well, if they're the ultimate customer, they're the one we're doing the work for, and they're disappointed, that could be a problem to delivering project success. We could be on time, in scope, and in budget, but if the interest holder at any stage is disappointed, and they're the ultimate end goal customer, then why do we keep moving? Just because the triangle is in balance? Well, it's the triangle is not sufficient. There's too many other things at play. So I think, the person who is a later or a hesitant adopter to Agile is thinking about it in a rigid way. It's not the way we do things. Well, if project delivery is actually about customer value, and if you're always thinking about how are we delivering value to who will use it, who has bought it, who will buy it, or who needs it, then that becomes another spoke in that wheel of metrics, and the metrics have shifted. It's just not as simple as time, cost, and scope anymore.
So I asked this as a question because I'm not certain, but I'll tell you what I heard and I'll tell you what my question will be, which is simply this. I've long looked at time, scope, and cost and thought, yeah, it's missing some key elements.
Yeah.
What I heard you describe in my language would be relationship.
Mm.
That relationship sits outside because, yeah, you can have things on time in scope with cost
Yeah.
and completely miss relationship mark.
Yeah.
Um, my question then is, are you suggesting that Agile makes sure that relationship gets considered on the way to the big three?
Yes. And here's why. In the 12 principles of Agile, the first one is customer satisfaction through early and continuous value delivery. That's the first tenet of principle of Agile. And that alone, collaboration is also in there. Collaborate between key interest holders and developers throughout the life of the project work. Create a supporting, trusting, and motivating project environment. Enable face-to-face interactions on a regular basis. These are all of the 12 principles of Agile. What does that mean? It means building a relationship. It means there is no interest holder list that sits on your desk whereby which you just inform your interest holders based on a predetermined communication plan schedule. That's not what Agile is. Agile is, oh, we just learned this about this sprint of work. And oh, that interest holder has a keen interest in this portion. What do? We don't just tell the interest holder, we invite them to the table to have a conversation. We reveal to them what we're learning. They become a part of the decision making in the actioning of the work, not at the end of the delivery. And that means you have working models. You have the ability to have an attention to detail that is, second to none. And it means that regularly reflecting on where you are and in integrating your interest holders means their value and delivering value to them is always the motivating force. And that's a relationship piece. Of course, the hard part is for many of us as project managers, I think classically trained, we didn't do a lot of work thinking about relationship building. Because, first of all, it's the hardest part. Arguably, it's the least favored part of project management. Full disclosure, it's my favorite part. It's what drew me into project management, but I know it is what keeps many people uncomfortable as project managers because it's not what they like to do. But we have to do it because they're the customer. And the value delivery is incredibly important as a metric, which is, I agree with you, it's relationship delivery. The hard part about this is we have to learn to take feedback. There are a lot of professionals out there who cannot take feedback, positive or negative. They're not good at it. And that also comes from this fear of, oh, I don't want to be seen as doing it wrong. Well, we all do it wrong. We all fail. The goal is fail fast. How do you fail fast? You take the immediate feedback that you failed, and instead of freaking out about it, you look for an opportunity to think about, well, what did that failure mean? What could it teach me? How can I rectify that? What changes or actions can we take as a team to make sure that that failure becomes literally a part of our success journey, not a marked failure? And every project I've ever been on, you have to fail in order to learn. And that's the beauty of Agile mindset in project management is the failures are successes because we don't just fail, we take the information and then we use it to benefit the overall project.
Yeah, I'm hearing failure as learning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And because to me, failure, I have a weird relationship with the word failure because failure is a judgment on an outcome.
Interesting.
Um, Outcomes can be outcomes. They're
Right.
just data. You can have 90% of something be successful, 10% a failure, and still have it labeled a failure.
You're right.
And
Yeah.
I used to say in network administration, you could set up all your network the exact same way, but if the 5% of your thing that's not working is the power cord, nothing else works. It's one of those systems that it needs to work that way. So,
Yeah, agreed.
but you have a 90% system that works.
Yeah.
Fix the power cord, and now you move from. So I just come back to learning on that one,
Yeah.
and I like that. And I really heard a learning iterative model.
Yes. Yes. That's definitely the greatest value and the greatest contribution to an agile project environment, I would say. And that's both the noun and the verb. Is that we are keeping our interest holders close. We are working together. We are delivering value in light of time, cost, and scope. And we are measuring those metrics without the fear of failure because failures are going to teach us things that are going to make the overall project success better.
Awesome. So thank you for the learning today. I learned a lot about Agile, the learning around learning and adaptiveness, and learning that our next podcast will be as fun as this one.
Well, thanks, Martin. Thanks for the question.
All right. Thanks so much.